Hello everyone and welcome back to the Belgian Beer Brothers channel. Cedric here in Antwerp with another brand new brew review. Today we are having something special for a change. We are tasting a tribute beer called Geroge IV by Brewery Deca in Woesten, which is a part of Vleteren, which is why they have a lot of Vleteren beers. But no, it is not west-vleteren, it is nearby and it is still in West Flanders, so do with that what you will. Now, for the name of this beer, many of you will instantly think of Geroge IV as the sovereign king of the United Kingdom, Great Britain and Ireland in the early 19th century. However, this has nothing to do with neither that George nor the UK, Great Britain or Ireland altogether. And yes, I had to Google that. This beer is named after the father of the current brewmaster, Geroge Christiaens. And what does that for mean? Well, quite simply, the Christiaens family appears to uphold the same tradition as the Van der Ginste family, namely by giving all their firstborn sons the same name. In this case, not Omer, but George or Josh. So Geroge IV was the fourth generation in this brewing family that goes way back, but that story is for another video. Geroge Christiaens IV primarily worked in Africa, building breweries from start to finish, and he bought Brewery Deca as a showpiece to show potential clients how a modest brewery could function and what it would look like. Unfortunately, having a brewery in Belgium to show to your African potential clients wasn't ideal, so he rented the brewery out, and after a few years his tenant filed for bankruptcy and George was left with an empty brewery. Now, luckily his son had ambition, so Nicolas also studied to become a brewer and he and his dad joined forces, reviving Deca. That is until the collaboration came to an abrupt stop after George was involved in a serious car accident in December of 2013. He sadly passed away after a few days after the accident, and Nicolas was left with a brewery and a small team, which quickly decided there would be no better way to honor their father and patron than to brew a tribute beer. So they developed the Geroge IV, which was launched late 2014. And in case you were wondering, in April 2021, the sixth generation Christiaens brewers was born in the form of identical twins, and Nicolas did choose to revive the family tradition by naming the firstborn son Georges Arthur and his brother Marius, so succession is assured. Now, as for the beer, the Geroge IV is a strong blonde beer with an ABV of 8%, of course top fermented, and is aged for 12 months in oak barrels. During the aging process, a small amount of whisky is added to the beer, so it's whisky infused, and after bottling the Geroge IV, it's also re-fermented in the bottle, so no effort or time was spared in honoring Father George. Now, I did emphasize the whiskey infused part because I have had some infusion beers with whiskey, with rum, with what you may call it, doesn't matter. But this is I think my first blonde whiskey infused beer. I know that there are some others on the market out there, but still. Now, I do like this label and I'll try to get it up here somewhere. But I really love this label with George's silhouette on there, and this kind of reminds me of the Hofterdolen beer, and I'll put a link up here somewhere as well. So, old strong beer brewed to old traditions, aged on oak barrels in loving memory of Geroge Christiaens 1930 to 2013. Yeah. Blessed be George. Let's have a taste. Immediate bubbling, a lot of purling up there. Ooh. I'm going to be very careful with those last milliliters because there is quite a bit of sediment down there. Now, first thing that I notice is a lot of purling. I even hear the bubbling. Lovely color. I would call this actually golden yellow. Yeah, this might be a golden blonde. Some nice, very white foam, but large bubbles. Probably dissipating very quickly. Well, we actually see it dissipating as we speak, but nonetheless, nice color. Very clear. Like I said, I left the sediment in the bottle. I had this standing upright for several days, if not weeks, before opening, because I've been planning this video for quite a while. Oh, this is a surprise. The very first thing that I smell is, I'd say, sweet apples, red apples, maybe a bit of sweet peach. And only when I take in a serious whiff, I get that oaky whiskey aroma. And even then it is still quite subtle. This is not a vanilla bomb. Also maybe a bit of grape. This is actually very fruity in the aroma, which comes as a surprise. Yeah, but the whiskey is definitely in there somewhere, be it subtle but ever present. I love the effervescence in this beer. Very active. Now bear in mind this has aged for a year in those barrels. It had a slight infusion with whiskey, and they do emphasize the small amount of whiskey. So I don't think that it is meant to be a whiskey bomb or a vanilla bomb. So yeah, I'm very curious. Let's have a taste. Cheers. Again, for some reason I get apples. You could have had me fooled and told me this was infused with, let's say, Calvados instead of whiskey, for example. But once that initial taste clears, I do get a bit of whiskey, a bit of bitterness. This is actually a very complex beer. Relatively fruity in the flavor as well. Very lively mouthfeel, very lovely mouthfeel. A lot of bitterness going on, so I do have questions for the hops. But it is still a beer. I have had some infused beers that were very, very strong, leaning towards the infusion instead of beer. But this is definitely a beer with a touch of whiskey. So also that barrel aging taste, that typical vanilla meets that oaky bitterness, that is very subtle. So I'm thinking they used relatively old barrels, which is absolutely not a bad thing, but means that this is way more subtle. Oh, I actually like this very much. Yeah. And the aftertaste is very interesting as well. I'm getting yeah, the same as the flavors, as the initial flavors. A bit of fruitiness, but mainly a dry, bitter beer with a hint of whiskey. So I think that this is a very, very well balanced, a very well brewed beer. And in terms of scoring, even though this is maybe not my cup of tea or not my favorite style or thing, this also doesn't taste like 8%, by the way. So I would give this like a 4, actually. I did not expect that. Nice. Also, I was eager to compare this to the Geroge whisky infused by Antwerp, but actually this has nothing to do with that. That is a very dark beer with quite a bit of whiskey infused, with a very, very strict recipe that we already knew. And this is a blonde with a completely different style, different idea. I might compare this to the Lazarus series by Brewery Jacob, but even then this is completely different. Like I said, more subtle, more balanced, more complex. So I maybe prefer this over the Lazarus series, even though those were pretty good as well. And if you're curious to the Lazarus series, I'll put a link up here as well. But yeah, very, very nice beer. Now I'm gonna enjoy this slowly and quietly because it is still an 8%er. But in the meantime, if you guys like this video, let me know down in the comments, hit that thumbs up. If you want to see more, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you'll get notified whenever I upload something, which should be every weekend around 8. And if you have any questions or suggestions, leave them down in the comments as well. And I will see you guys again next week with another brew review. Cheers.